Like and subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
Opinion: the purely voluntary force is turning 50 and is facing its worst crisis to date. Military leaders feared that few highly qualified recruits would volunteer, and initially they were right. As reported by James Kitfield in his book Prodigal Soldiers, How the Generation of Officers Born of Vietnam Revolutionized the American Style of War. Between 1977 and 1980, nearly half of all male Army recruits scored on standard military aptitude tests, the lowest mental category permitted by the service. 38% were dropouts. With defense budget cuts produced a hollow Army, the Army Chief of Staff warned in 1980. That changed in the 1980s, as patriotism increased and popular culture began to portray the military in a more positive light. From the deer hunter transition to Top Gun. Congress lifted wages and benefits, and the services figured out how to attract recruits with slogans like "Be All You Can Be." By 1990, 97% of Army recruits were high school graduates, and mandatory drug testing had sharply reduced the number of illegal drug users. Now, however, a retired general told me, the AVF is facing its worst crisis since Nixon founded it. All services are struggling to recruit. The crisis was particularly acute in the Army. Last year, it fell short of its recruiting goals by 15,000 troops, the equivalent of an entire division. This is a particularly ominous development given the growing threats from China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. More than 2 decades after September 11, 2001, and almost 2 years after the U.S. defeat in Afghanistan, war fatigue has set in. Numbers reflect concerns among many in the military that the AVF is creating a dangerous divide between the few who serve and the great majority who do not. Created. The number of veterans in the population fell from 18% in 1980 to about 7% in 2018. And it continues to fall as the older generation of conscripts dies out. The AVF has propelled us into becoming the best trained, equipped and organized combatant force in global history, retired Admiral James Stavridis, a former NATO commander, told me. But we have moved away from the citizen-soldier model that has been such a part of our nation's history. The AVF helped create an essentially professional cadre of warriors. We must work to ensure our military remains fully connected to the civilian world and to educate civilians about the military. The easiest way to bridge the civilian-military divide would be to reinstate the draft, but there is no such thing. Support a radical move either in the military or across the country. David South Carolina Chu, a former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, points out that reliance on conscripts creates morale and disciplinary problems and is increasingly inconsistent with a high-tech approach to warfare. In most countries, conscripts serve a year or two at most, barely long enough to master complex weapon systems. Mass mobilization during World War II broke down religious, regional, and ethnic barriers, paving the way for post-war advances in civil rights and an expansion of the federal government to address issues such as poverty. In the post-draft era, America has become increasingly polarized between red and blue communities. For example, President Biden recently proposed creating a new civilian climate corps. Congress should support such initiatives, but we should not have undue expectations of what they can achieve. The young people who sign up for volunteer service are already so civic-minded that they least need what these programs teach. He is undoubtedly right that such a program would produce young adults who are better prepared to become useful citizens. But there is no national emergency that would justify such a mobilization, and no agreement on how we could meaningfully employ 12 million people. Public employees' unions would certainly object, the cost would be prohibitive, and many would try to evade duty. Compulsory national service is no more likely in today's climate than a renewal of conscription. There is a good chance that the AVF can overcome its current problems with some tweaks, such as forming recruits